Okay, it looks like we had a few more people sign on and join us, so welcome everybody. We'll get started now. Thank you very much for joining us for this month's BCMA webinar. Today's webinar is number 11 in our series, and it is the MOU in Action webinar, a toolkit for the BC GLAM sector partners. My name is Ben Fast, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. I am the Programs and Member Services Coordinator for the BC Museums Association. This is a picture of me if you haven't met me before, and I'm here to help you. You can send me technical questions. There's my email address. You can also add them into the Q&A option as well. Now, before we begin, I would like to welcome our new BCMA webinar sponsors, NetX. NetX is on a mission to improve digital asset management at museums large and small. They partner with collections, marketing, and photography teams to implement a future-proof digital asset management platform. NetX clients include MoMA, the Met, the National Gallery, and many small regional museums in Canada, the US, and around the world. NetX Digital Asset Management at netx.net, and we hope that you'll stop by and visit them. Thank them for being a BCMA webinar sponsor. Now, before we begin, I just thought I'd go over a quick how-tos for the webinar platform. I know we have a lot of people joining us from the library and archive world, so if you haven't been on one of our webinars before, this is how you use it. If you're already signed on and you can hear me and see this screen, you are doing great. So well done, give yourself a pat on the back. This webinar does not require a camera or microphone, so if you're yelling at your screen trying to ask a question, please stop, we can't hear you. If you have a question or want to add a comment, simply use the Q&A button found in your control bar, and we'll read out all the questions so that everyone can hear later on. All right, so on with the webinar. I'd like to welcome this month's presenters, Daniel Collins, Daphne Wood, and David Alexander. Daniel is representing the Archives Association of BC, Daphne is representing the BC Library Association, and David Alexander is representing the BC Museums Association. We have attendees from all three organizations signing on today and listening in, so thank you everybody for joining us. It's great to have some of our MOU partners on board today. So Daniel, Daphne, and David, they're all in an office together, and I'd like to ask them to take over now. So everybody, please welcome Daniel, Daphne, and David.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining today. We are delighted to share with you the work that has been taking place with BC GLAM partnership. And what we're going to do today is give you an overview of what we've been working on. And I think most importantly, let you know how you can contribute to something that we're going to build together to create an even better BC. So Ben has already provided you with a brief introduction. The three of us are here together, huddled together in my office in Victoria at the Greater Victoria Public Library. And you'll hear from each of us. I'm going to kick things off, hand things over to David. Daniel will walk through the toolkit itself, and at the end, we've reserved quite a bit of time for you to share your thoughts, share some ideas that you have to help contribute to the toolkit that we are building. So the picture that you see on the screen right now has two of the three speakers. So David and I are in the middle, holding that very large, oversized MOU. It's affectionately known as our Publishers Clearinghouse check that we use to travel around the province. And this was, in fact, the announcement, the official announcement between the three associations of the MOU. That's really the foundation of our work together and our partnership. So we wanted to start there, then we're going to take a step back, give you context for our working relationship, and then get right to the toolkit, which is really a practical application of what we're doing together. So we're starting out our journey, looking back in time actually, at the point at which the MOU was signed. This was at the Surrey Libraries, and David and I are in the middle. We had our counterpart with us as well from the Archives Association of BC, and this really kicked off the work that we would commit to doing together based on shared values and a shared interest in creating an even better BC. So what is the GLAM partnership? I just wanted to make sure that that acronym is familiar for everyone. The GLAM partnership is galleries, libraries, archives, and museums working together collaboratively in the province of British Columbia. So the three founding members are the Archives Association of British Columbia, BCLA, and the BC Museums Association. So really, we represent the strength of our component parts. I thought this was a really good image to illustrate what we do together. This is, in fact, a digital camera that has been disassembled. And you can see that there are a number of unique pieces here that when they fit together, they can produce something that is absolutely amazing, that no individual part could do. And that's what we really thought was the foundation of our work together. We all have different perspectives. We have different professional associations, but really at the foundation of everything, we have shared values. And I want to take a minute to highlight those shared values because they are so important for the work that is about to take place with this toolkit. Together in the MOU, we articulated the shared values of intellectual and ethical integrity, equal rights and dignity of all persons, freedom of speech and freedom of inquiry, respect and recognition of Indigenous peoples and cultures, and a commitment to using our shared capacity for research and education for the betterment of BC communities. So in essence, the way that we work together is just as important as what we produce together. And the fact that we have a grassroots network of professionals that are in turn contributing to their associations, and then in turn working under this umbrella of the GLAM partnership, it gives us strength at all levels. And I'm really proud to share with you now my co-speaker, David Alexander, who is going to walk through a timeline of the partnership, and then it will hopefully get you thinking about how you might be able to contribute to this toolkit, which will be at the latter part of the presentation. So keep in mind your organization, your interests, and your expertise. Let me turn it over to David Alexander.
Thank you, Daphne. We are very snugly here, so if you hear crashing and banging, don't be alarmed. So we started, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. I'm going to talk about where we are and what comes next as well. Some of you have heard Daphne and I and Cindy, former president of AABC, speak before a conference. So some of this is familiar to you. We really started the conversation in 2015, and it started with really casual conversations between the presidents of BCMA, BCLA, and AABC. What are you working on? Is there an opportunity to work together? And this really blossomed. We all saw value. The professional organizations then started talking. We had some buy-in from our council, and then we started consulting with members. And that happened in a couple of ways. It happened anecdotally. We looked at, we talked with members and found out what they're working on, found out that there was some value in working together with their library and museum and gallery and archives neighbors. And then we attended conferences and we attended at least each conference at least once. We talked about what we were thinking about, asked for feedback, and we also asked what partnerships were happening out in the GLAM sector. And we were blown away by the number of partnerships that already exist. These are partnerships that are small, they're shared programming, or really big shared space, which was exciting. I think there is a good foundation for this MOU. We also talked with our stakeholders and funders, talked with the provincial government, and many museums and galleries in the province are funded by the Arts Council grants, and libraries are funded as well through the provincial government. And the provincial government was behind this 100%. They saw great efficiencies they thought this was a much better way to spend taxpayer dollars. So we signed the MOU March 2017. It was the first of its kind in Canada. It had been approved by all of our boards unanimously. And as you saw in the photo that Daphne presented, we had the then Minister Fassbender, who was Minister for Culture, Arts, and probably Tourism. It's been renamed a few times since then. So we had a really good buy-in from government. The immediate step that we took, which felt fairly minor at the time, but which has really blossomed into something bigger than we expected, was offering member rates to all of the members. So if you wanted to attend the BCMA conference in October and you are a member of BCLA, then you were able to get a discount to attend the conference. And we, at least with BCMA, we've seen a really nice contingent of archivists and librarians attend our programming, attend this webinar, and attend the conference, the last conference we had. And what that has allowed is a really good space for some of these conversations to happen between GLAM. So if you look at the MOU and you look at the organizations working at a high level, working to better the sector, we have an opportunity with these discounted rates for members to talk and create good relations and create those partnerships that are happening, that have happened and are happening organically. So that was the immediate benefit. The next steps for us are, of course, this toolkit. And we are really looking for your input. It's a toolkit that has to be useful to you. And then we're going to soft launch this toolkit at a GLAM symposium on May 8th. And May 8th is just before the BCLA conference. So any of you attending the conference, go a day early and check out the symposium. We have a great keynote and we are just finalizing the program. So you'll hear about that soon, but it'll be an opportunity for you to learn and also chat with your fellow GLAMers. And then in terms of the long-term impact of this MOU, we are a fairly powerful sector. One of our next steps is to really pull some stats to show that. So what is the economic impact of libraries, archives, museums, galleries in the province? How many people do they employ? And how many lives do they touch in the province? This will be really good fodder for talking with our funders. We have shared knowledge, we have shared expertise, and we have a real opportunity to become a powerful advocate and to work as one. So this is the beginning, and the toolkit is a nice concrete way to start creating those partnerships. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Daniel. Symposium on May 8th. And May 8th is just before the BCLA conference. So any of you attending the conference, go a day early and check out the symposium. We have a great keynote and we are just finalizing the program. So you'll hear about that soon, but it'll be an opportunity for you to learn and also chat with your fellow GLAMers. And then in terms of the long-term impact of this MOU, we are a fairly powerful sector. One of our next steps is to really pull some stats to show that. So what is the economic impact of libraries, archives, museums, galleries in the province? How many people do they employ? And how many lives do they touch in the province? This will be really good fodder for talking with our funders. We have shared knowledge, we have shared expertise, and we have a real opportunity to become a powerful advocate and to work as one. So this is the beginning, and the toolkit is a nice concrete way to start creating those partnerships. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Daniel. Thanks, David. So my name is Daniel Collins and I'm the member at large of the Archives Association of BC. And I'm going to give you just a brief introduction of what the toolkit is and what we hope to achieve by putting it out there. So the toolkit and the practical applications of the toolkit, the exercises that we hope to get you to follow, are about making connections. When we first envisioned the possible outcomes of the GLAM collaboration, as Daphne and David have said, we wanted to provide a practical tool, something that was tangible for all GLAM sector professionals, anybody who's enthusiastic about the sector at all. And what we came up with is a guide that we can first use to situate ourselves and our institutions within the wider GLAM community, and then to use that knowledge to see how we can expand our networks and strengthen the connections that we have, and to grow our connections to the groups that we share common goals with. Now, whether we know it or not, we're all part of these GLAM networks. So if we try and imagine everybody who's participating in this webinar today as a node on the graph, and we plotted out the connections between those nodes, without too much effort, you could map everybody on this call. And in doing so, we'd learn some very interesting things about who we are and what we're connected to. So that's what the toolkit is asking you to do. We'd like people to take a look at ourselves and our institutions and to try and map the other people and groups who we know, map the people and groups who we'd like to get to know, then identify people within our own institutions, the individuals who work well in a collaborative environment, and then to identify people within other institutions we want to connect with, who we're already connected with, and then literally map those out with us at the center and all our connections spread out around us. And from here, we can assess the strength of those collaborative efforts. So we can gauge how strong our partnerships are by ranking them on a scale of 1 to 10. 0 being no relationship whatsoever, and 10 being a transformational relationship with integrated resources and shared content and events, etc. And we can also rank the feasibility of the partnerships. So we can take into account their physical or their virtual vicinity, their readiness to collaborate, their ability to do so, and so on. And once you've created this map and identified your actual and your potential partners, we then recommend that you would start to share that. We'd recommend that people who you want to collaborate with, you share that knowledge and you share the connections. And then we'd ask them to create a similar map and to share that. And slowly and hopefully a complex network of partnerships will begin to emerge here, and we can visualize ourselves and our partners within the broader GLAM community. And then what we can use that visualization to create some realization. And this is just a starting point. The goal of the toolkit is first to make people aware of their potential partnerships and situate themselves, and then to create actual metrics where you can set goals and aim at increasing the number of connections and strengthening existing connections over time. And once you've created this foundation, we would hope that people would start to build these connections organically by supporting the institutions that we share values with. Like, it could be something as simple as retweeting a post. And then you could build all the way up to shared activities, shared events, and eventually we'd work in tandem with our partner organizations to advance our missions. And these partnerships are already happening. As David alluded to there's a lot of institutions participating in collaborative efforts right now. There's been a few examples of archives and libraries, museums, who are intimately connected and share the same management structures, same shared budget, and are often under the same roof as well. So that's a starting point. And the most recent example being the Surrey Museum, which is due to open in the autumn of this year, with the specific goal of being a place where people can connect and create their own shared experiences in the broader GLAM sector. So our hopes that this toolkit won't just be used to establish institutions. We'd hope that all GLAM sector professionals, young and old, would participate in this exercise. And whether that's students who are just beginning their careers or older professionals who'd like to share their expertise,
We want to get a whole range of people participating in this and sharing. And we'd like to think of the network mapping as the beginning and not the end of the analysis. So we want to create something that's going to be useful for people. We need your help with that. We want to learn from people's experiences. We want to know what works for you. We want to know what doesn't work. And most importantly, we want to collaborate on this tool and contribute as a community to it. And as the networks grow, the toolkit will continue to grow, and hopefully it'll be used to strengthen the broad sector, the GLAM sector as a whole.
Yes, okay, so now we're going to go through, this is Daphne again, we're going to go through the skeleton of the toolkit. You can see an overview of the contents here, and we're going to walk you through the section that we have compiled. You saw already the timeline of the partnership, the memorandum of understanding, and a joint media announcement. They were included earlier in the presentation. We were thinking that putting those establishing foundational documents really help put the concept of the GLAM partnership in context, so that any member of our respective association, no matter where they are located in the province, they will be able to take this MOU and use it almost as a calling card to be able to approach another organization that is in the GLAM sector and say, you know what, I think that we have the start of something good here. We have shared values that we have established. We have shared interests, and let's see where we can take this. So Daniel is now going to walk us through the sections of this toolkit, and then, as I mentioned, at the end, we will get to the point where we would like to hear from you and hear what type of tools, resources, and models would be valuable for the work that you do.
Okay, so I'll just give an overview of the contents here. Section A is a little bit of background. It's the timeline of the BC GLAM partnerships, as David has went through. It's a copy of the MOU is on there, and the joint media announcement. So if you want to share that with your partner organizations to get your foot in the door, then we'd ask you to do that. Section B is the basics of building new partnerships. So this is the section where we want you to situate yourselves, map out who you want to collaborate with, gain some metrics for where you see those partnerships standing right now and where you'd like to see them going in the future. And then we are going to provide some samples and some templates of how you would do that. And we'd hope that you would log into where we have this toolkit located online, pull those off of there, and have that be your first step in creating these partnerships. So section C then will give us a framework for collaboration. So some examples of partnerships that have taken on that have been conducted in the past. We'll explain how they were successful, where they weren't successful, and just give you some ideas of the type of joint partnerships that you can create. And then section D is an overview of who we are, our missions, our visions, our values, and where we want to be in the future. So our AABC, we're working on our strategic plans now for the coming years. We're going to share these on here. The BCLA and the BCMA are going to do the same. And from that, we will try and link these goals and link our strategic plans so that we can build upon them in the future and use it as a basic bit for partnership. This is the overview of section B. I'll take you through these slides real quick. As we said, it's all about ourselves. It all starts with us. And from there, we can build out. Here's an example of a partnership and mapping how fit we are to collaborate with one another. So whether it's coordinating, whether it's integrating, you want to map out the level of integration and the level of connection, and from there you can build upon that. So this is an example of the exercise that we would like you to participate in. So we would like you to use the results of the community asset mapping to consider the placement of each organization on an axis. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 being no relationship, 5 being a transactional relationship, and 10 being a major transformational partnership. And then rank the feasibility, whether it's highly unlikely that you're going to collaborate, whether there's potential, and then whether it's happening right now would be a 10. So we can map ourselves out on this, and we can use it as a basis for going forward. And just to give an example of some of the partnerships that we can conduct. So organizing staff meeting spaces, staff exercises, public lecture series, whether featuring partners from both organizations. And then it could all go all the way up to conducting joint research, measuring the outcomes of partnerships, and putting that out there in the community so that people can see it and people can participate in it. And here's an example of the matrix. So what you really want to be here is up on the high maturity, high capacity. And I mean, that's difficult to achieve, but it's definitely achievable if you map it out and create a plan to do so. And we would ask that people sort of create this and then create where they'd like to see it within 5 years, within 10 years. And then you can set a goal and set some plans for collaborative effort. And now it's over to you. We'd like to hear what you have to say about this toolkit, and we'd like to say what doesn't work and what works for you. And as I said, we want this to be a community effort. We want people to contribute to this over time. We want it to be a living document, and we want it to grow. So your participation is key to that.
We are inviting audience participation at this point. So for this toolkit to be successful, and that means to be inclusive, to engage the expertise of all of our respective members across the province, we really would love to hear from you. What tools you might have that you would recommend that are helpful in your work, what tools you can share from your experience, and any other content that you think would be valuable, because what we are going to do, meaning the 3 GLAM partners, is we are going to collate everything that we receive to continue to build on the draft toolkit that we have created. And we're going to be sharing it at the upcoming May symposium. We are going to commit to releasing this GLAM toolkit on a quarterly basis with all of the updates that we receive in the previous quarter. So this will be a living document and one that will reflect a growing number of perspectives and a deepening level of expertise, the more that people collaborate and contribute. At the very end of our presentation, I'll talk about how we're going to do that, meaning where will this toolkit live? How can I access it? How can I share it? And how can I contribute to it? But for right now, at this point, I would like to turn it over to you, and we'd love to hear from participants with specifics about tools that you'd like to recommend or ideas that you'd like to suggest that we could use to strengthen this toolkit.
And so if you do have something to add, feel free to add it into the chat window or into the Q&A section, and we'll read it out so everybody hears it, just to make sure.
Thank you. And we also welcome your questions. If you have anything that you'd like to circle back to that you saw earlier in the presentation, or anything that you'd like to raise at this point, this would be a great time to do so since we have everybody together on the call. Ben, are you able to moderate for us so you could let us know if a question comes through text?
Definitely, I'll be reading them all out. I'm just assuming everybody's typing madly right now. We haven't seen one come in, although Lisa G says that ideas for funding and grant opportunities would be useful.
Yes.
I think most people agree with you, Lisa.
Yes, thank you. And in fact, we had noted that when we were putting together the MOU, we thought often we are in competition with each other. And in fact, what we could do to be more effective is to develop the grant application at the earliest stages rather than having an organization that submits a grant application and then commits to developing further partnerships. So it's almost done after the fact or as an extension of an original idea. What we're hoping will take place, in fact, is that organizations will get together on the ground floor and talk about what the desired outcome could be and work with those that they are serving in the community, their members, the community members, other partners, and decide the future together and put forward something that is really reflective of what no individual organization could do on its own. We think funders will really like this.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Anita and Sunny, they're asking, can you tell us more about the kinds of tools you were thinking of?
Yes, since I am closest to the mic, I'm going to answer, but I'm also going to welcome Danielle and David to jump in, to shout from across the desk. The type of tools that will be included are the type of examples you saw Daniel present. There'll be things like a matrix to use to assess the degree of complexity of your current partnership. So they are things that you use to determine, number one, are you ready for a partnership? And if so, if you are ready, to what degree are you prepared to enter into the partnership? Are you ready to commit resources, meaning time and money and effort? Or are you at the stage where you can comfortably co-promote what you already do, which is a very entry-level type of partnership? It's increasing awareness, it's a positive step forward, but it does not involve the co-creation or any of the higher level benefits that come with working in collaboration. Another example of the type of tool that will be in the toolkit, we have some samples that you can use for your communications efforts. So we have templates on how to craft a media release, how to craft a media advisory, how to develop your social media program. We have examples of strategic plans. We have examples of value statements from a number of GLAM sector organizations. Those are the types of things that we think are useful, because for those organizations that are looking at changing what they currently have or creating something new, it's always nice to look at what currently exists. We also are looking at some facilitation tools, because having a partnership in place often means bringing together groups of individuals that haven't worked together before in some cases, and really getting to know what the goals are, what the objectives are, and what is achievable within a defined period of time. So there's some project management tools in here as well.
I think too, I'm far away, so you may not hear me, but I think too, we have great ideas for what we can include, but what we're really looking for are tools that are going to be useful for you. What is going to help you elevate a partnership? What is going to help you promote a partnership? What is going to help you create a partnership?
So I can repeat that succinctly. David said, we'd like to hear from you as well to know what is most valuable for you to create, promote, or strengthen an existing partnership.
Right, all right. So we have a couple sort of less questions and more recommendations or comments. So from Daniel, examples and case studies would be useful to better communicate the advantages of collaboration. So that's one that I think a lot of people would agree on. And from Michelle, Michelle talks about how their organization has been opening in exhibit space, and they've made a lot of connections with museums and galleries, and we'll be working with archives later. But one thing that they found differs greatly between libraries and museums is the timelines and workflow within each one, which can create a barrier to working together. So either a template or a set of questions to ask partners around their timelines would be helpful in that toolkit. And then we had a question from Amy. So will identified partnerships be used to expand the membership of the GLAM sector MOU to include other provincial groups involved in the sector?
Yeah, I think it is, we always thought it would be a wide umbrella. Libraries, archives, museums, galleries make sense as a first step, but I think that the real value of this MOU is bringing us together. We're stronger if we work together, and I think that that goes for other organizations. It's a fairly big umbrella.
Yes, I think another area that isn't currently included in the GLAM acronym would be the performing arts. And many of the existing partners, the 3 partners, may have existing connections with the performing arts, but they're not part of this formal MOU, for example. So yes, we would like to see it expanded. First, what we would like to do is to make this toolkit it's almost like the toolkit will be the means of expansion, so that when we include things that have just been mentioned, things like case studies, things like a way to assess a timeline to see if a project is viable, that those in fact will be the tools that are used to help bring new partners on board. And I also should mention too that this MOU, which is quite new, is also something that will need generations of ambassadors and champions. So succession planning of the GLAM sector is another really important point. We really are looking to the involvement and interest of our respective members, people who want to get involved. That could be in a hands-on way by helping us revise future editions of the toolkit once the first version is released, through to being ambassadors for the GLAM sector and committing to delivering presentations, committing to leading advocacy efforts, and committing to doing measurement of our success, both in terms of the number of people that we reach and our collective economic impact.
We have a comment and question from W. Wright in Smithers. It's a bit of a longer one, so I'll just read through it here. Our local museum enriches our programs. I believe this is from Smithers Library. So our local museum enriches our programs with items from their collections, such as artifacts to display during themed events or searching their archives for historical photos to enlarge and display. We also cross-promote some events and work together on multi-organizational committees for community cultural events. And they would like to hear examples of that as well, either through the toolkit or even here if you have them.
Thank you. It almost sounds like we've got a case study right there. We just have to, in fact, with the suggestions that come forward, in some cases, the suggestion is a great example in itself for inclusion. And we heard when we were presenting at the various conferences, association conferences last year, individuals who would stand up and say, you know, in my community, we are already partnering with the archives, or we are already co-located with the library. Co-location is an area that is, I think, well researched and well documented, and in the capital planning world, co-location often is an important criteria for success. So we know that massing all of this expertise and opportunity in one place has great results for the community. And what we're trying to do is actually mass our collective impact in the same way, even though geographically we're covering a large area in the province of BC.
Yeah, definitely. And a question from Danae. For inclusion in the toolkit, perhaps a template or examples of project proposals as a step in creating partnerships and collaboration. I guess more a recommendation than a question.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we would hope this toolkit would accomplish, is to allow people to situate themselves in the broader sector, then measure where they can build greater collaboration, where they can share their expertise and share their knowledge base. And then we would hope that they can have some solid metrics for moving forward. So if you can situate yourself on a map and use it to say, okay, here's where I'd like to be in 5 years, here's where I'd like to be in 10, and just have some numbers and metrics so that you can use it as a basis to move forward.
And here's another suggestion from Amy, tools to coordinate marketing of festivals, events, and initiatives from organizations of all scales across the province, i.e. to improve the reach of small groups and reduce scattered messaging of what's going on around the province. For sure.
That's a really good idea. I think there are already a number of examples. I'm thinking of Family Literacy Week, for example. That might be familiar to a lot of librarians who are on the call. And that's where there's a concerted effort to convey one message. There are examples throughout the year of these types of things. And in some cases, if it's a long-standing commemorative event or day of celebration, the means of communicating a single message already exist. They just need to be applied to a project or a partnership, or in fact, I think what I would like to do is build this partnership that we have to the point of communicating to the public the importance, the relevance, the essential nature of the GLAM sector and how we help make BC a better place to live and to work and to study. So we certainly have a lot of strengths in our respective areas. It's just a matter of harnessing them. And one thing that I think we should mention too is that when you look at what's happening nationwide in the GLAM sector, there are a number of initiatives taking place, and we actually have a lot in common with another coastal region. The province of Nova Scotia has a LAM partnership, a slightly different acronym, but they hope to be adding the G soon, they said, with an expansion of their MOU to include galleries. But even though we're at opposite ends of the country, they actually have been following a similar path, trying to harness the strength that already exists, the spirit of collaboration, and then getting concrete deliverables like a toolkit, like an advocacy plan, like a champion network, so that this great work can spread organically. So it's not creating these bottlenecks or pinch points that are dependent on one individual or one under-resourced partner.
And I would also like to add to that, from this, I'd like to see some greater social media integration too. When one organization publishes an event, it should get shared by the rest of the sector to drag as many people in as possible. I know that some of the events that the BCMA puts on, some of the events that the BCLA puts on, are very relevant and very interesting for archivists. You know, we can go there and talk about these things, and God knows what can flow from that. We would like to see people getting together and meeting in the real world, but sharing and communicating on social media to get people out there.
And I think from the BCMA side, just in the office here, Daphne brought up a good point about that, those weeks and those programs that come together that could tie into that social media. For example, we had a BC Museums Week last year, and we had quite a few libraries join in on the communication on Twitter and on Facebook, and really helping make that a strong week, and we really appreciated that. And there's another one coming up in May 13th to May 20th, so watch for that. Feel free to take part and engage with your local museums and on that social media platform. So definitely good points there. If there's any other comments or questions, feel free to put them in. It looks like we've caught up with our backlog so far, but we've got a few more minutes for questions. So if anybody else has any, please add them to the chat or the Q&A.
You mentioned
I have zoomed in on the contact information here. These are the Twitter handles for David, Daniel, and myself. Doesn't that sound like, it sounds like some folksy musical group or something? David, Daniel, and Daphne. These are our Twitter handles, and basically we included these here because this leads me to my next point. We are going to be gathering and continue to gather your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions through social media. And so we would invite you to send a tweet with your thoughts, your suggestions. This is a great way to share them. And this is also the mechanism we're going to use to collect them. So once we approach that May 8th GLAM symposium, we are going to collect anything that we've received through social media and include it on that first edition GLAM toolkit that will be shared at the symposium. This GLAM toolkit is going to live on a sub-site which will be hosted by the BC Library Association, but it is dedicated to the GLAM sector, and you will be able to find future iterations of this toolkit on a quarterly basis at the site that we're going to reveal at the symposium. So if you're wondering, where is this going to live? How do I contribute to it? I've just answered two of those questions. You can contribute via social media, and then you'll be able to access the kit and the latest version of the kit on this BCLA hosted website.
The AABC conference is taking place in the Royal BC Museum in Victoria on April 13th. But prior to that, we have a GLAM event taking place on April 12th. So it's a one-day workshop entitled Archives for GLAM Professionals. And participants will get an introduction to working with paper records, working with photographs, working with maps and audiovisual records, and how to manage them in the context of the broader GLAM institutions like libraries and museums who often integrate with those records. It's aimed at librarians and staff who would like to learn a little bit more about basic preservation of archival records and providing institutional access to private archives. And in keeping with the GLAM MOU, members of the BCMA and the BCLA will get discounted rates for that workshop. So that's the Archives for GLAM Professionals on April 12th at the Royal BC Museum in Victoria.
And Daphne or David or Daniel, can you comment on how we'll find out information about the May event, the GLAM Symposium in Vancouver?
Yes, David. Hand signals that no one can see.
We are just finalizing the program, so we will share all that information via our respective social media sites.
Yes, our associations will get in touch with our respective members and let you know about registration details, which are coming soon. We have secured a fabulous keynote speaker, and we are going to have a really wonderful session that is a great mix of hearing inspirational ideas, contributing expertise, and releasing this toolkit that is ready to go, ready to use, ready to put into practice. No. The element of surprise and suspense.
Any last questions, Ben?
It doesn't look like too much. It looks like we had thank you and look forward to seeing, using, and contributing the toolkit soon. That's definitely something we're hoping you can do soon as well. So thank you for logging in. If there are any other questions, we'll maybe do one more minute of waiting and seeing. Feel free to type any last minute comments or questions in.
Perfect. We've got a running list of everything that has been discussed on this webinar. David has taken copious notes. So we've captured all of that great content and welcome any additional comments to any of us at the contact information that you see on the screen.
Mm-hmm. And as Daphne mentioned and as David mentioned, this will all come out through social media and through our own communications channels. So for BCMA members, that's through our Hoot e-newsletter, as well as our listserv and our Twitter and Facebook. And I know there's lots of good communications coming out of the other two organizations as well, so watch for that there. So I don't see any more questions, so I am just going to grab the screen back here, and I want to do one more thank you to our webinar sponsor for this month, NetX. Feel free to check them out at netx.net, and I'll make a little plug for our next month's webinar.